I found the first body. Sometime after 6 a.m., I'd woken. I knew I'd been dreaming, and I knew they'd been weird. I actually lay there, in my cot, for a good couple of minutes, trying to figure out where I was. Whatever the dreams were, they'd scared me. I felt like a kid after a nightmare, unsure, frightened, silent, and frozen. The sound of Roy snoring away across the room brought me back to reality. I forced myself to move, to sit up. I needed to clear my head. I pushed the thick pile of blankets off the bed and grabbed my old greatcoat from the floor. There were cigarettes in the pocket. I couldn't smoke in the chapel, but I could step outside, onto the little porch. My cot was closest to the door. I could make my way out of the darkened room by memory. Then it was through the tiny lobby and outside. The cold was biting. It must have been at least 40 below. I pulled my collar up and reached for a cigarette. The moon was fighting a losing battle to shine through the clouds, but it was enough to show the scene. The snow had stopped falling, but the interstate and everything around was still covered by a good 12 inches of snow. I was looking south, over where the highway was buried, to the forest, enjoying the sight of the trees. With the snow and the faint moonlight, it was beautiful and very peaceful. The sight cleared my head. I flicked the glowing end of the cigarette out onto the snow beside me, watching it arc through the night air and fall onto a darker patch. There shouldn't be a dark patch. It had been snowing when I went to bed around midnight. Everything should be white. I figured I should check it out, even though I was freezing. I pulled out my lighter and took a step. I flicked the flint. The wick caught. I stared, unable for a second to process what I saw. Then I stepped back, turned, and raced inside to wake the others. "Ripped apart," was Roy's succinct description. That was after he'd thrown up. "Ripped apart," he repeated to the other three. "There's bits of one all over the place out there. Whoever, or whatever, did that to him didn't leave a lot. The only reason we know it's one is 'cause he's the only one who isn't here." I was sitting behind Roy, cross-legged on my cot, puffing a cigarette. Chapel or not, I wasn't about to go back out there, and I most definitely needed a smoke. I could see the other four, see how shaken they were. See their minds turning things over. "It's him, innit?" said Eddie, making the obvious connection and pointing at me. I was surprised. Eddie never struck me as the thinking type, more the sneaky and violent type. His eyes, in that skinny and sharp face of his, were never still. His fingers twitched all the time too. I'd pegged him as some sort of strung-out user. "Easy there," I said, rising from my bed. Nothing to say it was any of us. Certainly no reason to say it was me. You want to be careful before you start sending accusations flying like that. Eddie seemed to shrink into himself. His friend, Robbie, the guy I always thought of as Eddie's muscles, leaned forward, though. "We know nothing about you," said Robbie. "You could be some psycho." I spread my hands. "Guess I see how you could think that. You know my story. If I was a proper psycho, I'm sure I'd have a much better one." I said that with more confidence than I really had. Oh, they knew as much as I did about what had happened to me. I'd been tracking a wolf pack for the Alaska Conservation Foundation. I'd followed them into a deep forest, old growth, a real ancient vibe. Then the weather had started to close in. The sky had gone dark, really dark, adding to the claustrophobic feel of the forest. I'd honestly felt scared, more so even than I had when I was under fire in Afghanistan. Something had seemed wrong. That was the last thought I could remember until I woke in the chapel. There were 5 guys there, all homeless from Fairbanks. Some church outfit had felt it would be a good idea to truck them out to a remote chapel about halfway between Esther and Nananatu. I don't know, find themselves, find religion, who knows. Lucky for me they were there though. They found me, unconscious, near the interstate and stuck me in a nice warm bed. They saved my life. After that, the snow had started to come down, hard. We'd been cut off sometime before I woke. I couldn't find my phone, and they didn't have one. We had power from a generator out back, but not many other comforts. We'd figured we'd just hang tight for a bit and someone would come find us, but now. My introspection was broken by the sound of Mickey, the youngest in the chapel. Kid was young but apparently had been living on the streets for a couple of years. "Wolves," he said. "I heard wolves last night, howling out there. And Jerry, he'd been tracking wolves. Must be wolves killed one." I was about to say something when Roy looked at me. His look was a pretty clear shut up, so I did. Roy said to the others, "Now that kinda makes sense." Maybe one stepped out. He gets taken by surprise, and then taken down by wolves before he can make any noise. Jerry must have startled them off. So, no one goes out. We stay inside, and we all stay safe. The other three seemed to accept that. They drifted away, Eddie and Robbie going back to their continual card game. Mickey started pacing by the windows, staring out into the gloom. The snow had started falling again, making it hard for the slowly rising sun to brighten the day. I guessed he was looking for wolves. I sat back on my bed and made a bit of room. Roy came over and sat beside me, his bulk lowering my cot about an inch. "You know that wasn't wolves, don't you?" I asked him quietly. "Yep. Wolves is clinical, they kill efficiently, they don't rip prey to shreds. Something else did that. Don't know what, but figure it's gotta be one of us." I countered, "What if it's me?" "Gotta trust someone, don't ya?" He replied. "You a vet. I know that. You got the stare, but you ain't got the crazy stare. I know 'cause I've been there too. See, I reckon I can trust you, of all the folks in here, 'cause we got something same in our history. That's a bond, man." I nodded. That covered it. "We keep an eye on them," Roy said. "We treat 'em like we would folks over there. Most of 'em is good, but you watch the behavior, you spot the bad apple before they do you. And you and me, we take turns sleeping tonight." I nodded again. I'd liked Roy when I first met him. Now, I liked him more. He seemed like someone I could trust. The dull day wore slowly on. It was clear that the other three hadn't entirely accepted the wolf story. Everyone was watching everyone like a hawk. Roy was right, it did remind me of being back over there. There was tension in the air, that feeling like everything was about to blow. The tension got to Eddie and Mickey by evening. Mickey said something stupid and Eddie was up and at him. Roy and I were in, separating them before anything serious was done. Even Robbie took a break from his usual role as Eddie's enforcer and pulled Eddie off to one side to cool off. We sat Mickey on his cot, fed him some coffee, and told him to watch his mouth. Everything settled down after that, except that vibe, the tension, remained in the air. I felt restless, not just from the tension, but from a feeling I needed to do something. There was that niggle in the back of my mind, that feeling that there was something I should be doing. I was trapped in a chapel with a bunch of homeless guys in the middle of Alaska. What on earth could I need to be doing? As the evening drew in, Roy and I made plans. He offered to take the darkest shift, after the sun dropped, but before the moon came up. I could get in a bit of sleep first. He'd wake me around 1, and I'd have the moon outside for a bit of light, if the snow cloud cleared. I wasn't going to argue with that. A bit of sleep would help clear my head, have me sharp for my shift. I hit my cot and seemed to fall asleep almost instantly. Then it felt like Roy woke me only minutes later. It must be time for my shift. I must have needed that sleep. I felt so much better, so refreshed. I'd slept so deeply I swear I hadn't even dreamed. "The others are sleeping," Roy told me quietly. Mickey was the last. He's still tossing and turning. Maybe might want to keep an eye on him special. I sat up, nodded, and grabbed a cigarette from my coat. And he left. Roy moved his bulk back to his cot with an impressive degree of silence. He was snoring by the time I finished my smoke. I let my eyes drift around the room. The moon must have been up in a clear sky outside. It softened everything in the room, but it gave enough light for me to be certain there was no movement. I rose, padding to the windows. The snowscape outside looked amazing. The moon must have been full or thereabout. It had obviously snowed heavily sometime before. The snow was higher, almost to the windowsill. For a moment, I felt I could believe in magic. It was that sort of view. I had to drag myself away, to turn back to the room and our possible killer. The time dragged by. I wished I had more smokes. I sat on my cot. I walked around the room. I had another smoke, cursing my lack of self-control. I itched my beard. It had got long quick. Must be the cold. I looked out the window again. I checked my watch. Just 1 hour gone. I wanted to sit, to watch the room. I used to be able to do that, over there and with the wolves, just sit and watch for hours. Now, though, something was eating at me. I couldn't sit. That nagging feeling that I should be doing something came back, harder. Something had to be done, something important. What was it? It was frustrating. Then I started to shake. Not from the cold, the room was warm enough. I had shakes, like I was ill. Then nausea. My head started spinning. Was I having a heart attack or something? I stumbled, quietly, to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face, leaned on the side of the basin, and looked in the mirror. Then I was sliding to the floor, my brain going bye-bye. I couldn't recall what I'd seen in the mirror, but it shook me. I tried to rise again, to get back out into the room, but I was so dizzy, feeling so ill. My head fell back, my eyes closed. I woke with my head on the toilet. Not the first time that's happened. My mind was racing, trying to process something from last night, from my dreams. I wasn't sure. I tried to grasp whatever I'd been dreaming, but it slipped away, leaving behind feelings of violence, of death, of evil. Not the first time that's happened either. Not since I'd been over there. I climbed to my feet, pleased that my previous dizziness had gone. I pulled the bathroom door open. Just as Roy pushed from the other side. We met, face to face, right in the doorway. He did not look happy. I felt terrible. I'd passed out on the job. It felt like letting down my mother. His arm was across the doorway, blocking my exit. What happened? He asked in a low voice. Got dizzy, ill, went to the bathroom. I guess I must have passed out. Roy's eyes searched mine. He looked over my face, then into the bathroom behind me. You don't look well, he said. I started to explain myself again. I'm really sorry. I just collapsed. Roy raised a hand, cutting me off, and then pointed into the chapel behind him. I looked over his shoulder. Eddie was on one side of the room, a knife in his hand. Mickey was on the other side, brandishing a chair. Between them, snow was drifting into the room, through the doors. I was suddenly aware of the cold. Both doors were open to the outside. What? I started, but again, Roy cut me off with a gesture. It got cold, he said, in that low voice of his. Woke me up. I seen the door standing open. I figure you gone out maybe after our killer. So, I gets up and goes to see if you need help. Except it ain't you out there. It's Robbie. He's on his back with his throat ripped out. I come back in. These other two are up, so I gotta tell them. Next thing they start blaming me, then they start blaming each other, 'cause I'm too big to take, I guess. Now they'll be blaming you. I staggered out of the bathroom, still unsteady on my feet, following Roy. As soon as I got out the door, Mickey and Eddie both swung to look at me. He did it. He did it, Mickey kept repeating. Eddie's eyes narrowed. That's him. We all been sleeping, and he done Robbie. I'll cut him. Roy didn't shout, but his voice seemed to dominate the room. Enough. I found him in the head. He's sick, man. Look at him. Do you honestly think he could take down Robbie? I must have looked terrible. They both stared at me and then backed off to their corners. Eddie was still talking a streak, though. Robbie could have beat him. Yeah. Robbie beat him up. That's why he's like that. Robbie fought. Roy shook his head. You remember how we found him? Guy's not well. He's no way strong enough to take out Robbie. Roy guided me to my cot and helped me sit down. I was still unsteady. Eddie turned back to Roy. Then you done it. You were that punk kid. I'll cut you all up. Mickey shouted from the other side of the room. You were the one that's strung out. You're the one that's going all twitchy. You did it. You stay away from me. Roy rose to his full height. Stop. We don't know what happened to Robbie. Shouting at each other ain't going to solve nothing. Now I'm gonna close that door 'fore we all freeze, and then we can talk about it. Mickey was losing it. I could see the whites of his eyes, his panicked look. He glanced at the door, and then back to us. No way, he said. I'm not staying here with you. One of you killed Robbie, and one. I'm outta here. To my absolute amazement, he grabbed his bag and coat and headed for the door. Don't be a fool, I said. It's -30 out there. There's 2, maybe 3, foot of snow. You'll die. Roy added. Jerry's right. It's about 20 miles to Esther, the same to Nanana. You won't last 5. Mickey was already at the door. I'll last longer out there than with some psycho in here. I lasted years on the streets. I can walk down a snowy road. Who's with me? Eddie stayed in his corner. So you can kill me out there? No chance. I'm staying here. I started to say something, but Roy put his hand on my shoulder. Free countryman. He wanna go? I ain't stopping him. Mickey stood in the door, staring at us with wild eyes. You were all gonna die in here. Then he was gone. I shook my head, wondering at the stupidity of people. He'd be dead before he could reach any settlement. The wind, the cold, or maybe even the wolves, would have him. A wave of dizziness suddenly washed over me, and I let my head fall back onto my bed. Roy looked at me. Eddie's the only other left. I figure I better deal with him. You should get some rest. I felt weakness, tiredness, sweep over me. What did Roy mean he'd deal with Eddie? I struggled to force my eyes open again, but it was too late. Blackness took me. When I woke again, I found Roy sitting by my cot, reading a book he'd found somewhere. Awake? He asked. Good. Eddie put up a bit of a fight, but he's all tied up now. Reckon that solves our problems. I sat up, feeling much better than I had before, and looked in the direction Roy had indicated. Eddie was sitting in a chair, his hands tied behind him, his ankles secured to the chair legs. He glared at us. His hate was almost physical. I felt a wave of relief, though, knowing that Roy was not the killer and that Eddie was secure. I nodded my thanks to Roy and looked out the window. It seemed rather dark. I checked my watch. I'd slept the day away. The sun was long gone already. For some reason, that made me think, again, that there was something I really should be doing. Something important. Roy had seen me look at my watch. Yep, you was out to it all day. Way I see it, that means you get first watch, and I get some shut-eye. I nodded, still bothered by whatever it was buzzing around in the back of my brain. Sure, I'll just go use the bathroom. Roy nodded. I rose and wandered over to the bathroom, trying desperately to remember what I had to do. 3? The number came to my mind. 3. 3 what? I closed the door behind me. Almost instantly, I fell to my knees, the nausea and dizziness returning. This time, though, I didn't black out. I rode the feeling, letting it build, and welcoming the power behind it. I felt strength start to flow through me. I feel my muscles building, my bones twist, my face extend. As I did, I felt the memories rushing back. The wolves, the forest, the skinwalker, the deal, my life in exchange for my service, and his power. But only if 3? Now I stand, my body transformed. In the mirror, I see my muzzle, the sharp teeth, the glittering eyes. 3 kills in the first 3 nights. To fix the transformation, I need that to let me keep this power, this unnatural and brutal power. That's what's been bugging me. That's what's been in the back of my mind. I crashed through the door. Roy turns at the noise and reacts faster than I would have given him credit for. His overweight body leaps from the bed, and a knife appears in his hand. He's fast, but I have true power. Contemptuously, I knock the blade from his hand. Only then, when he understands how outclassed he is, do I see the fear in his eyes. I swing my other arm. My claws rip into his neck, jerking the windpipe and artery out. I want to make his death quick, efficient. I owe him that. He stares at me briefly, a look of understanding crossing his face, before he topples over to lie still in a puddle of his own blood. Eddie's whimpers draw my attention. He is still tied up, his eyes nearly bursting out of his face. I'm tempted to end him now, but I refrain. I have something else to do. I go to the door and open both to the chill night air. Outside are the wolves, the pack, my pack. The pad slowly inside, heading for Eddie. He whimpers again as they approach. Then they are on him, and apart from one scream, he is silent and will be forever. His death is natural, really. Wolves are natural, they are a force of nature. I, on the other hand, am not. I am a force of evil. Now I can bear this power for eternity, 3 lives, what a small price to pay for eternal strength. I'm looking forward to what I can do.